My name is Laura R. Farnham, and I'm the same age I was the last time they decided who I was allowed to be. Thanksgiving at my parents' house has always felt like a performance, not the warm, sentimental kind, but the exhausting one where everyone knows their lines and no one dares to improvise. Every year I go anyway, convincing myself that maybe this time would be different, that maybe someone would ask about my work without twisting it into a joke, or notice that I exist beyond family emergencies and group texts. I suppose some part of me still hoped for a miracle. The house smelled like burnt rolls and cinnamon that had been overused to hide something else. Maybe resentment, maybe disappointment. My mom had already opened the wine, which meant she was floating somewhere between cheerful and absent, smiling at the wrong moments, nodding on autopilot. My dad was planted in his recliner, yelling at the TV like the quarterback could hear him. Josh and his wife Rachel arrived late, as usual, with a store-bought pie and their son Levi balanced on Josh's shoulders, like a postcard version of a happy family. My mom made a huge deal about the pie. She clapped her hands, praised it, asked where it was from. I stood there holding the cheesecake I'd brought from a bakery people line up for, the one she specifically asked me to bring. She barely glanced at it. It sat untouched on the counter while everyone raved about Josh's dried-out pumpkin pie like it was a sacred offering. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just dessert, but the familiar sting crept in anyway. Josh has always been the favorite. Failed 2 majors in college, dropped out, landed a warehouse job through one of my dad's friends, married a woman who treats every room like it revolves around her, and somehow still emerged as the success story. I, on the other hand, make good money working remotely, travel a few times a year, have no debt, and apparently that makes me the family question mark, the one they whisper about. Dinner was tense in the quiet way that only family dinners can be. Polite voices, sharp edges. No one asked about my life. I'd just gotten back from Spain the week before, but when I mentioned it casually, Rachel tilted her head like I'd said I'd joined a cult. Must be nice, she said, smiling thinly. Traveling all the time, not worrying about anyone but yourself. Josh laughed, and that was enough to derail the rest of the meal. The food wasn't good. Dry turkey, bland stuffing, lumpy gravy. I ate anyway because I knew if I didn't, they'd say I was being dramatic. I stayed through the whole thing, right up until dessert. My cheesecake still unopened, everyone digging into the store-bought pie like it was gourmet. I took a final bite quietly, savoring it for myself. That's when my dad looked at me and said it. Still the family disappointment, huh? He didn't sneer. He didn't raise his voice. He said it flat, like he was stating a fact he'd already accepted. My fork froze halfway down. I looked around the table. No one reacted. My mom smiled that same strange smile she uses when she doesn't want to acknowledge something's wrong. Rachel pretended Levi had said something funny. Josh was already reaching for a second slice. I didn't say a word. I stood up, grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The silence behind me was louder than anything I could have said. I drove back to my apartment, opened the cheesecake, and ate it properly. That night, I didn't lose sleep because I was angry. I lost it because I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. They didn't respect me, and once I saw that clearly, there was no going back. 2 weeks passed before my phone rang. Josh's name lit up the screen, and for a second I almost didn't answer. He hadn't called me since Thanksgiving. Not to ask if I got home safely, not to apologize, not even to pretend none of it happened. Curiosity won out, though, so I picked up. "Why did my rent bounce?" he demanded without greeting, his voice already sharp, already annoyed, like I was customer service that had failed him. I leaned back against my kitchen counter and let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "Maybe," I said slowly, the disappointment's finally pulling back. He didn't laugh. He didn't even pretend to. There was a pause, just a few seconds, but I could tell by the way he inhaled that he understood exactly what I meant. Then his voice rose. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." That's when he lost it. He accused me of being cold, arrogant, selfish, said I'd changed, like that was an insult. He talked fast, like if he kept going, I wouldn't have time to interrupt. He brought up Levi, brought up Rachel's hours getting cut, brought up bills piling up, and finally, like a weapon he'd been saving, he threw out the word family. "We're family, Laura. You don't do this to family." I waited until he ran out of steam. Then I said, "Starting next month, rent's going up to $1,500. The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. "You're joking," he said finally, a short, disbelieving laugh. "You have to be joking." "I'm not." I reminded him calmly that the apartment was fully renovated, 2 bedrooms, great location. In this city, 1,500 was still below market. I'd just been giving him a break. "A break," he called it, scoffing. "You call that a break?" "You've been paying $500 a month for 4 years, Josh," I said. "That's not a break. That's a gift. You couldn't rent a shared basement for that in this zip code." That's when he turned mean. He said I was screwing over a family with a kid, said he thought I had a heart, said my remote job and travel didn't make me better than anyone. Then he made the mistake of saying the thing he probably believed all along. "You wouldn't survive a month without that salary. You think it makes you special? You've always been a joke." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just looked at my phone and said, "New rent is $2,500. His jaw practically hit the floor through the speaker. He laughed again, louder this time, like I was bluffing. "You're insane," he said. "I'll get a lawyer." "There's no lease," I replied. It was all verbal. He stormed off the call, muttering threats that didn't scare me nearly as much as they should have. A few hours later, Rachel texted me. Not one message, but a wall of them. Emotional, panicked, guilt-soaked. She talked about Levi, about how he didn't deserve this, about how they'd end up homeless if I kept pushing, and then she added the line that settled something permanently in my chest. "You wouldn't be doing this if we were really your family." That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't soften anything. For 4 years, I'd given them that apartment because they begged, because they said it was temporary, because they promised they'd get on their feet. I kept the rent low, not because I felt guilty, but because I didn't want them to feel embarrassed. I protected their pride while quietly eroding my own boundaries. 3 days later, Josh showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just pounding like he owned the place. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, red-faced, breathing hard, eyes wild with entitlement. "You're actually doing this?" he demanded. "You're tripling the rent just like that?" "It's more than triple," I said calmly. "What do you think is fair?" "Fair?" he snapped. "We have a kid. You knew we were barely making it. You pull the rug out from under us and act like it's business." "I gave you 4 years," I said. "That was business." He sneered, said I had no idea what real life was like, that my little lifestyle bubble didn't mean anything, that I disgusted him. And as he turned to leave, he muttered something under his breath about how people like me always thought they were better than everyone else. I watched him walk away and realized something that felt oddly calming. They never saw me as a sister. They saw me as an ATM. I thought the money was the worst part. I really did. I thought the ugliest thing about this whole situation was the entitlement. The way Josh could scream at me like I was the villain for finally asking him to pay something close to reality. But then I found out what they were saying about me when I wasn't in the room, and that changed everything. It wasn't even Josh who revealed it. It was a stranger at a coffee shop. I was sitting near the window, half listening to 2 women at the next table talk about rent prices, zoning out the way you do when you've had too little sleep and too much emotional noise. I wasn't really paying attention until one of them mentioned the building where Josh lived, my building. She said a unit with the same layout had just rented for $3,400 a month, and she couldn't believe it. Her friend laughed and said, "Yeah, that's the guy who's got some kind of deal with the owner. I heard from his wife that the sister's rich and stupid, just gives them the place out of guilt." My whole body went still. I leaned over before I could stop myself. "Sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was pounding. "Did you say Rachel?" They looked surprised, then nodded. "Yeah," one of them said. "Rachel and Josh, 5th floor. Why?" I didn't answer. I didn't finish my drink. I walked out and sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. It wasn't the money anymore. It was the story. The narrative they were feeding people like candy. That I was some clueless idiot with so much cash, I didn't know what to do with it, so I handed out apartments like party favors. That they were the clever ones, the ones who'd figured out how to play me. I had kept their rent quiet to protect them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I genuinely didn't want them to feel small. I didn't tell friends. I didn't brag. I didn't hold it over them. And they used that silence to build a version of me that made them feel powerful. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking with rage that felt clean and focused. I pulled up old texts from Rachel, years of vague thank yous and promises that they'd make it right when things got better. 4 years of just until spring and just until the new job and just until Levi starts school. And now she was out there calling me rich and stupid like my generosity was something to mock behind my back. I sent Josh one text. "You've got 2 weeks to move out." That was it. No paragraph, no explanation, just the line. He called immediately. I let it ring. He called again and again. Finally, I picked up. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted. "You heard me," I said calmly. "You're out." "There's no lease," he snapped. "You can't evict us." "You're not tenants," I replied. "You're guests. And guests don't trash the person keeping a roof over their kid's head." He launched into another rant, claiming I was overreacting, claiming Rachel didn't mean it, claiming it was all just family talk. Then, unbelievably, he tried to blame the woman from the coffee shop, like I should be furious at her for repeating it, instead of furious at them for saying it. I repeated the deadline. 2 weeks. He hung up on me again, like he was still the one deciding how this would go. Rachel showed up the next day. She didn't knock. She buzzed the intercom until I finally opened the building door, then stood outside my apartment like she owned the hallway. Her eyes were red and puffy, but her voice was sharp beneath the tears. She launched into pleading, saying she didn't mean for it to come out that way, that it was taken out of context, that people twisted her words. I asked her one question. "Did you or did you not tell people I was giving you that apartment because I'm rich and stupid?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me like an animal caught in headlights. That silence was louder than any confession. Josh pulled up minutes later, grabbed her arm, and told her to get in the car. He didn't even look at me as they drove off. It was like I wasn't a person. I was a problem they could outrun. That night, my mom called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got me again. That stubborn part of me that still hoped for something better. She started soft, like she was easing into a normal conversation, asked how I was, mentioned a new casserole recipe. Then, after a pause that felt like the true beginning, she slid into it. "Josh told us you're kicking them out. Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "Laura, you can't just throw a family with a child out on the street," she replied, voice firm now, as if she were scolding a teenager instead of speaking to her adult daughter. "You have to be reasonable." I asked her how much she thought rent went for in that building. She guessed wildly low. I corrected her. Then I told her what Josh had been paying for 4 years. 500. Silence. For half a second, I thought maybe she'd finally understand, but she didn't. Her voice came back stronger, sharper. "So you've been fine with that for years, and now suddenly you're tripling it? Why now?" I told her the truth, that I overheard Rachel mocking me, that they'd been leeching while bragging behind my back, that I was done. My mom didn't apologize. She didn't condemn them. She blamed me for reacting. She said family says things they don't mean. She said I was being vindictive. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. "Your father and I think it might be best if you reconsider. Maybe let them stay until spring." I asked her why my father was suddenly involved in something he'd never cared about before. She hesitated, then said something that stunned me. She said my dad had co-signed the original loan for that apartment, didn't he? I told her no. I paid the down payment myself. I got the mortgage myself. I signed every paper. I told them about it the day I closed. She went quiet, then said, "Well, he always felt like he should have had some say." So now they were making up ownership because control had always been the point. After that call, my phone started ringing like someone had opened a floodgate. My uncle, a cousin, even a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. Each one repeating the same message. Don't make waves. Don't cause trouble. It's just money. Let it go. It was surreal. Like I was being gaslit by a whole network of people who hadn't paid a cent toward that apartment and had never once asked if I was okay. Then Cam, an old friend, texted me a screenshot. Rachel had posted a long, vague status on Facebook about being betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect her, about how blood doesn't always mean loyalty. The comments were overflowing with sympathy. People offering spare rooms, asking if Levi was okay. In the replies, Rachel hinted that she was being forced out by someone jealous of their happiness. Jealous. That word snapped something in me clean in half. I opened my laptop and drafted an official eviction notice. 2 weeks. Hand delivered. And I didn't say a word. I delivered the notice the next morning. Josh wasn't home. Rachel answered the door in sweats, Levy half hidden behind her leg, thumb in his mouth. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I handed her the paper and turned to leave. As I stepped away, she muttered something under her breath, barely loud enough to hear. "You'll regret this." I stopped and looked back at her. "Will I?" I asked, genuinely curious. She didn't answer. 2 days passed with no boxes in the hallway, no movers, no signs they were preparing to leave. Silence can be strategic, and I knew it. I filed the official eviction with the city. 7 days after that, law enforcement could be involved. My lawyer walked me through every step. No lease, no tenant protections. They were guests, and guests had overstayed. That night, my mom texted, "Please don't do this. They're packing. Just give them more time." I didn't reply. An hour later, another message followed. "Your father says you should be careful. Josh isn't handling this well." The words felt less like concern and more like a warning. 2 hours after that, I heard a noise outside my apartment. Not in the hallway, outside my window. I live on the 3rd floor. There's a fire escape. I turned off the lights, heart hammering, and crept into the kitchen. I peeked through the blinds and saw a shadow crouched near the window, a shape moving where no one should be. I yanked the window open and yelled as loud as I could. The figure jolted, scrambled, and disappeared down the ladder. I didn't see the face, but I didn't need to. The next morning, I filed a police report. I gave them the photo of the door damage I'd just received from building management, the one I hadn't even known existed until then. The word thief had been gouged into the wood below the peephole, deep and aggressive. No one had reported it. Not the neighbors, not the office. I knew why. Josh had probably done it himself or let it happen and told Levi not to say a word. He was 5, not stupid, just easy to coach. I emailed the report and CC'd Josh. I didn't accuse him outright. I didn't have to. That night, the movers showed up. Boxes, noise, Levi crying, Rachel barking orders, Josh not speaking to anyone. They cleared out by midnight. The next morning, I walked through the apartment with the keys. It was trashed. Scuff marks on the walls, cupboards hanging open, carpet ripped at the corner, peanut butter smeared handprints on the sliding glass door. No note, just a receipt on the counter from a hardware store. One item purchased, wood carving tool, paid in cash. I stood there for a few minutes, not angry, just strangely calm. There was something poetic about it, the way they left destruction behind like a child breaking a toy they didn't want anyone else to have. I took a photo of the damage, emailed it to the building manager, and paid for the door replacement out of pocket, $900. I didn't worry about it. I'd make it back. 4 days later, the new tenants moved in. A young couple from out of state, polite, enthusiastic, excited about the space. They signed for $3,000 a month without blinking. First and last month's rent wired before I handed over the keys. I left them a bottle of wine as a welcome gift. They sent a selfie by the window Josh had once taped a blanket over, smiling, grateful. The apartment felt clean again, not just physically, like the air had been cleared. I thought it was over. It wasn't. My dad called. He didn't mention the fire escape. He didn't ask about the door. He didn't apologize for pretending he had any claim to the place. He just said I'd gone too far and should have let them stay until Levi finished the school year. Texts followed from people I barely knew anymore, repeating Rachel's lines. Cold, heartless, greedy. Rachel had been busy online. She posted on Facebook, Instagram, local forums, even Reddit. Long paragraphs about betrayal, unjust eviction, and a greedy landlord's sister. She left out the rent, left out the lack of a lease, left out the fire escape. She posted Levi's picture, said he cried at night, said he asked why Aunt Laura didn't love them anymore. For a moment, it almost worked. Then I remembered the cafe, rich and stupid, thief. A few days after the new tenants settled in, I ran into Rachel at the grocery store, frozen meals in her cart, Levi holding her hand. He waved at me. I waved back. Rachel stared at me and said quietly, "You sleep okay now?" "Better than ever," I replied. "They're living with my parents now. I hear Josh is flipping sneakers online. It's not going well. Rachel's working part-time at a dental office. They've been denied from 2 rentals already. Credit issues. My mom hasn't called since January." My dad asked once if I'd consider a short phone call with Josh to talk things through. I ignored it. Then last week, I checked my mailbox and found a thick envelope with messy handwriting. No return address. Inside was a drawing in crayon, a tall building, a small stick figure with a beard, another smaller one holding its hand, a bright yellow sun. a heart floating above them. At the top, in uneven letters, it said, Aunt Laura. No note, no guilt, just that. I didn't frame it. I didn't analyze it. I put it on the fridge with a magnet. Every time I pass it, I feel a strange mix of peace and clarity. Because whatever the adults think of me, the kid knew exactly who I was. And somehow, that was enough. Once the noise finally died down, the silence felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious at first. For years, there had always been something pulling at me, some crisis, some guilt-laced request, some reminder that I existed in my family only when I was useful. And now there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive posts popping up on my screen. Just quiet mornings, steady rent deposits, and the hum of a life that no longer revolved around managing other people's chaos. The new tenants settled in quickly. They fixed the balcony lights Josh had always ignored, hung art on the walls, and added plants that caught the sunlight in the afternoons. Sometimes they'd text me small updates, like a leaky faucet they fixed themselves, or a package accidentally delivered to the wrong unit. They treated the place with respect, and in return, I treated them like adults, not obligations. Every month the payment came through, clean and on time. No drama, no apologies, no explanations required. Josh and Rachel stayed with my parents longer than anyone expected. Weeks turned into months. The temporary arrangement stretched thin, tension spilling into places I no longer had to witness firsthand. I heard bits and pieces through relatives who thought they were being neutral. Josh complained about lack of privacy. Rachel complained about rules. My parents complained about stress. I listened without responding. For once, their problems weren't mine to solve. The only time my resolve wavered was when I looked at the drawing on my fridge. Levi's crayon lines were uneven, the sun a little too big, the figures crooked but certain. I wondered if he asked questions. I wondered what he was told. I wondered if one day he'd remember me as the aunt who vanished, or the one who refused to let adults turn her into a villain for setting boundaries. I couldn't control that, and accepting that was part of the healing. One evening, months later, my dad sent a message that surprised me. Not an accusation, not a demand, just a simple line. We miss you. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. It was a statement that expected me to bridge the gap like I always had. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I was finally honest with myself. Missing me wasn't the same as respecting me. Life went on, quietly and steadily. I focused on my work. I traveled again, not as an escape, but as a choice. I made friends who knew me without history weighing them down. I built routines that felt good instead of obligatory. And slowly, without fanfare, the label they'd given me lost its power. Family disappointment. It used to sit in my chest like a verdict, like a sentence handed down without trial. Now it felt hollow, outdated, something that belonged to a version of me I no longer lived inside. I wasn't a disappointment. I was simply someone who stopped accepting crumbs and started demanding respect. Every now and then, I'd hear updates. Josh's sneaker hustle failed. Rachel picked up more hours. They were still struggling. My parents were tired. The cycle continued exactly as it always had, just without me in the middle of it. And that was the strangest part. Once I stepped out, nothing collapsed. Nothing improved either. It just kept spinning, unchanged. One night, I stood in my kitchen, looking at the fridge, at Levi's drawing held up by a cheap magnet. I thought about Thanksgiving, about the table, the pie, my father's voice saying that word like it was a fact. I smiled, not bitterly, but calmly. Still the family disappointment, huh? If that's what it takes to live a life without being used, belittled, or rewritten, then I'll wear it. Not as a wound, as proof that I finally chose myself.